Looking for tips and tricks on a new city? Top Dog Tours is the best place to check out walking tours. We are in Boston, Philadelphia, Toronto, and New York City. Visit us on topdogtours.com to book your tour today and check us out on social media for offers, discounts, and pictures. Hi, this is Nicole Kelly. So I, along with my producer, Patrick, decided it might be nice if we did a little intro to each episode to kind of introduce the guest a little bit, talk about if I have a prior relationship with them, and, how the episode came about. So for this first little intro, I'm super excited to talk about my friend Josh. And Josh is an amazing human and one of my favorite people. And I actually met Josh before I met him. So Josh is a Broadway performer. He's in a lot of original Broadway casts, and he was in the first national tour of Hair. And if you know anything about my family, we are obsessed with Hair. My sister named her dog Burger, and she was literally just telling us she's going to name all of her dogs for the rest of her life after characters from Hair. So very pointed references. And Josh was in the first national. And when we first met him, my husband was like, I'm pretty sure I danced with him in the aisle of the Pantages Theater. When I mentioned to Josh, he's like, yeah, that sounds about right. I'd also seen him in a couple shows. I'm pretty sure I saw him when he was in the national tour of Wicked as Bach. I definitely saw him in the cast of A New Brain at City Center, and I remember him, and that was a very fun summer because I got to see basically everything playing in New York at the time because my husband was out of town for a gig, and I was really excited to see the show, and I definitely remember him. And what's great about Josh is he's super talented, but he's also a really good human. And that's one of the reasons I think he's worked so much is because people really want to be around him. And I love spending time with him. And I'm super excited for you all to get to know him. Josh is actually in previews for a brand new musical. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the episode. So he is in the new musical Death Becomes Her, which is playing at the Lunt-Fontanne. They started previews on Wednesday. And me and my sister and my husband were there. And if you want to see a little preview of that, you can check out my TikTok and Instagram, which are both Shebrew in the City. I posted a little video. And Josh is a featured character and actually gets his own song, which I thought was really cool because I was unaware that was going to happen. And my family loves Death Becomes Her. So if you're a fan of the movie as well, I would definitely check that out. It is fantastic. My husband also knows one of the producers. He did a show with her. So we're very, very invested in the show. We want it to do really, really well. So I'm really looking forward to all of you getting to know Josh. And because we had so much to talk about, this is actually going to be my first 2-part episode. So we're going to be releasing one half today and the other half later on this week. Because we had so much to talk about. You'll also get to enjoy hearing one of my dogs kind of crying in the background a little bit. I apologize for that. We have moved apartments, so it's going to be a little bit easier recording moving forward, even when I have people in person, but I want to apologize ahead of time. So please enjoy this episode. Hi, this is Nicole Kelly, and this is Shebrew in the City. And today I'm sitting down with one of my favorite humans in the entire world, Broadway star extraordinaire, Josh Lamon. How are you today, Josh?
I'm wonderful, Nicole. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad that we were finally able to make this happen.
I know, me too. I adore you so much. So I've been looking forward to this.
It's always fun to interview people I actually know because there's kind of like a base of knowledge, I guess.
Sure.
So it's nice to sit down with you and in person because I don't do this in person too often.
Yeah.
It's usually digital, virtual.
Yeah.
Digital, virtual, both, whatever you want to call it. If you hear my lovely dogs in the background, they are locked up, so they are upset about that.
They're just big fans of the show.
They are.
So
they want to be
they're
involved.
just really excited.
They want to be involved. So let's jump right in. So what I usually start out by asking is about people's Jewish backgrounds. So how were you religious growing up? Did you go to Hebrew school? Did you have a bar mitzvah? What was that like?
I've never really been religious, so to speak, but I grew up Jewish. I did go to Hebrew school, and it was very much a part of my childhood and my upbringing. We always went to Friday night services. And of course, I had a bar mitzvah. It wasn't as epic as I think I wished it was. Because, growing up, you go to some bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs, and some of them are they're fine. And then you go to others where they dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. So mine was pretty simple. I decided that my parents were like, we can either throw you a massive party or we can go to Israel as a family. And being, 13 and a theater kid, I was like, well, I'll see your trip to Israel, but, we have to stop in New York so I can see my first Broadway show.
Oh, cool.
And they agreed to that.
What was the show that you saw?
Oh, my goodness, Nicole. So we stayed at, there was like a DoubleTree where the Palace Theater was, or is.
Yeah.
We stayed there. My first meal was at the Olive Garden.
I went there for my birthday one year before we went and saw that revival of Sunset Boulevard. And I was working at a restaurant at the time, and one of my managers was like, you are a hospitality professional. Why were you at Olive Garden?
Why are you not at Olive Garden?
I wanted breadsticks. And I remember I told Patrick, I was like, I want to go to Olive Garden before the show. He was like, what?
I took Caitlin and Izzy, the two lead girls from the prom, to Olive Garden during tech because Izzy had never been.
No?
No, and we had so many breadsticks, I swear I got sick from it.
They're good.
They're great, but they don't hold up because I remember being like, I need more to go. And but anyway, so off topic. Okay, Judaism, me,
yes,
wow.
So you went to Olive Garden.
Oh, yes. And the show that I was dying to see was the original Broadway company of Beauty and the Beast. So I spent some of my bar mitzvah money on a single ticket. I don't know why my parents were like, yeah, go by yourself, but I did. I sat in the orchestra, and I remember on the playbill there was this little note from Disney being like, if this is your first time seeing a Broadway show, welcome, and all this stuff. And I was just over the moon. I mean, I remember just like on the plane ride looking down over New York and being like, wow, Susan Egan is down there right now. Like, that's what a dork I was.
Susan Egan was Patrick's principal at OSHA.
You stop it. I mean, I've never met her. I always joke. I'm always like, oh, Susie Egan. So, Susan, if you're listening, I love you. So I did that, and it was epic. And then my mom and my sister and her friend and I went to go see Miss Saigon after that. And that was very, very sad.
Yes.
And yeah.
Definitely the antithesis. Is that the right word? Antithesis?
Sure.
Of Beauty and the Beast. Ironically, Beauty and the Beast is the first Broadway musical I saw at the now defunct Schubert Theater in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
And I think my sisters too. So I feel like my mom still talks about it like it's the pinnacle of musical theater. Like she'll see something and be like, but it's not as good as Beauty and the Beast.
Nothing is, mother.
I know. Well, this is also back before they cut the entire chorus.
Oh, sure.
When there was like a full ensemble.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that.
But naturally, going back to Judaism, I had a Broadway-themed bar mitzvah.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it wasn't fancy. The party was at the temple, but all the tables were different Broadway shows. And to give you a peek into how popular I was, the kids' table was Sweeney Todd. So, just a demented little, like, musical theater kid.
I used to listen to the opening of Sweeney Todd on Napster, dating myself.
Napster
all the time because that's what millennials do. We did something similar to our wedding that all the tabers.
I love tabers.
I do too. All the tables were named after musicals that have weddings in them. So like Fiddler on the Roof, Funny Girl, Wedding Singer, Showboat. That have like wedding dresses and wedding stuff. So we did something kind of similar. Did you sing through your bar mitzvah? My mom loves to tell the story that I like instead of kind of just chanting, I sang the entire thing, which I guess I did. But she talks about I belted my home tour. Yeah, I know the lick at the end of Wicked.
Amen. I sang like the Torah portion, but I was also a terrible Hebrew student. I think I have ADD or ADHD. I'm not sure, but it just was not gelling. Also, I was always just a terrible student. My mother would insist that I practice, and I'd put in the cassette tape of the cantor chanting and whatnot. And then I'd put on my headphones and listen to show tunes on my Walkman in my room. So I remember the cantor at one point being like, you have to take this seriously or we are canceling your bar mitzvah. which was like a shanda, being like,
Yeah.
you know, you don't cancel your bar mitzvah.
No.
And so I got my act together and figured it out.
I feel like that's the story for most people. I was like super student and had it like uber prepared way before time. I took it very seriously.
I'm sure.
I did. That's why my mom thought that I was going to be like a cantor or a rabbi or something. And then ironically, I found theater and that kind of replaced that.
Yeah, my mother always, I think, still wants me to be a cantor. And I'm like, that ship has sailed, mother.
You know, there's a lot of cantors I know who used to be musical theater performers.
Sure.
And then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore because being a musical theater performer is hard. So I'm going to join the clergy.
Oh, believe me, I would if I could, but it's so much work. Though my cantor growing up, cantor Lori Frank, who I love, she was a performer as well. And then my first professional audition as a kid, she coached me on it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit in the past personally about how your mom is a huge fan of Debbie Friedman.
Oh, yes. She loves Debbie Friedman. I do too.
Can you explain to people listening who that is? Because I did not know for the longest time. And did exposure to music with Debbie Friedman kind of help shape your career in any way?
Well, I think it's how to describe Debbie Friedman. Maybe, back then she was sort of like the Taylor Swift of Judaica music, very folk songy, but also just remarkable. Music has always been it just transports me. It makes me feel things. It makes me feel understood. It makes me feel seen in a way. And even as somebody not totally religious, her music always stuck with me. I don't think it really pushed me into theater or had much impact necessarily on my career, but the storytelling always did. And especially like going away, I would go away to a Jewish sleepover camp in the summer.
Which is rare for people on the West Coast. That's a very East Coast thing.
Oh, and it was fancy too. I didn't know this at the time. It was in Malibu. It was called, I think, Ginling Hilltop Camp or something. It was super, super fun. But my favorite part about it was we would always sing, like in the cafeteria, we'd always sing these songs together. And so Debbie Friedman always had an impact on my life, for sure.
I definitely think that's something that kind of drew me when I was younger to Judaism, the musical aspect. And then when I realized that there was a whole musical world of theater outside of Judaism, I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with theater, is because I had fallen in love with music and storytelling and all of that through synagogue. Yeah,
I mean, my synagogue was also very performative, I guess. We would have these giant shows every Purim, and
the spiels.
The spiels. We would have our spiels, and then we belonged to two synagogues growing up. In hindsight, I'm like, okay, but
that's a lot of work.
One of them had a for lack of better terms, company, a children's theater group called Showbiz, which was Show Beth Israel Students. And Kara Friedman was the woman who ran it, and she would write original Jewish rock operas for kids.
Oh, cool.
And we would do a new one every year, and it was always really fun. So I guess in that regard, it did really feed that dramatic need for me, or theatrical need for me.
So first exposure to your future career through one of the two synagogues
Yeah.
that your family. I do know someone who's a member of 3 synagogues.
Whoa.
It's complicated. It had to do with like preschool admissions, I think.
Oh, okay.
But
that
I
makes
think
sense.
in New York it's common because of that. So was this your first exposure to musical theater through this Showbiz?
Not really, though. I remember seeing my sister in the musical version of Noah's Ark. And, there was a rock opera that they wrote called Esther that I was obsessed with. And I remember the song where they're trying to find the new queen. It's like, the search is on, the search is on, the search. And just being obsessed with this when I was a kid. But my first real exposure, there's this group, this company called San Diego Children's Theater, or San Diego Junior Theater in San Diego in Balboa Park. A lot of incredible people got their start there. Casey Nicola, Annette Benning, Greg Barnes, so many wonderful, wonderful performers. And my mom got us season tickets when, I must have been about 3 or maybe even younger. And we had front row center seats, and we would see every show. And for whatever reason, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And it was also fun because after the show, all the kids would come outside in their costumes, and you could get their autograph and take pictures with them. And granted, they were like teenagers.
Yeah.
But as like a 2-year-old, they were celebrities to me. And so between that and an obsession with the Muppets, I was obsessed with the Muppets. I still am. And I would like put on costumes, like my sister's old dance costumes from her recitals. I'd put those on and just perform in front of the television to the Muppet
That's
Show.
what we were saying our daughter does. Like she likes to wear costumes. I would turn on like a period show with women wearing obviously like huge dresses. It was set in like the 1870s, and she made me put on like a party dress for her. And I understand that because I always feel like the day for the first dress rehearsal was always my favorite day doing a show, because it really kind of gels together everything because you physically feel like the character in their outfit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were these San Diego, you said Junior theater? Were these the first shows that you saw? What was your first professional show?
I don't remember the first professional show that I saw, but I do remember seeing at the Starlight Bowl, which doesn't exist anymore. It's an amphitheater in Balboa Park, and it's unique because airplanes fly over it, and then you have to freeze the actors on stage. It's hilarious. But I remember seeing chess there when I was little, and that made no sense to me. I remember...
I don't think which version. There's like 6 versions.
Who knows what version? I just remember being like, this is boring. We saw Evita there. And again, even like at like, 4th grade or whatever, being like, okay, next. And I loved shows like Joseph, But, and I also remember... But my family knew that I loved theater so much that they just always took me with them. I think I was the only, 6-year-old that saw the national tour of Follies, And I don't know why my family was like, Follies is coming to town. Let's take Josh. Because he'll identify with people going through, a past midlife crisis and falling out of love with each other. That's great. That's great for
and
him.
the bananas second half of the second act that makes no sense to me as an adult. That most recent revival was really cool visually, but I still I'd never seen it in person. So that's that part where they just go crazy.
Oh yeah,
I'm like,
Loveland.
what is happening?
Oh, I love the show though. But I remember I saw the revival a few times. At the intermission once, this woman next to me, this older woman who was just very, very moved. And I forget what she said exactly, but we looked at each other and I was like, how are you enjoying the show? And she's like, it's wonderful. I'm just so sad. I was like, is it too early for a cocktail? Tears before bedtime, dear.
It's never too early for a cocktail in the theater. When I moved here, that was such a shock to me because you don't drink in theaters in LA, and it's something that's really pushed here.
Oh yeah.
So when I first moved here, first started seeing shows on Broadway, I was like, what is this craziness of you can get sloshed before the show even starts?
Yeah, it's a miracle sometimes.
Yeah, for some shows it's necessary.
I will say, and it's fine if we air it, I saw K-pop, which was a very, very short-lived show here.
Yeah.
And, as far as the book was sort of a mess and whatnot, was it a great show? No. But my friends and I had the most fun that we've ever had, at a show. With the dancing and a little bit of booze, you know? Yeah.
Yes. I'd prefer getting drunk and seeing a Broadway show than getting drunk and going to a club. And depending on the show, it could be a club. I could see with a musical like that, getting drunk with your friends and I don't know.
Yeah.
When I saw Beautiful Noise with my sister, I wasn't drinking, and she was like, "Why are you screaming, singing Sweet Caroline?" She was so embarrassed. I think I posted something on the internet, and my mom was like, "I sent you to school for theater, and this is what you sound like." But yeah, there are some shows that alcohol definitely helps. How old were you when you started doing shows? How old were you when you started doing the children's? Did you do? I'm sorry. So I'm assuming you worked with San Diego Junior Theater.
I did not until elementary school. I started performing at a local community junior theater.
Yeah.
I believe starting in 1st grade was when I started, and then my first professional job was in 5th grade. It's the one that my cantor coached me on. It was Gypsy.
Oh.
Starring Karen Morrow.
Oh my God. I love Karen Morrow. Patrick said we love Karen Morrow, who like I feel was born like a decade too late.
Yeah.
Which, is like a Rose thing, because she was very much an Ethel Merman, but was just young enough that musical theater was starting to change, that she didn't become a superstar like Ethel Merman. But she actually came when I was in college, would come and like teach an audition technique class.
Yeah.
She's such a sweet lady.
She's remarkable. And she was so kind to the kids. And so that was my first job. I sang It's a Jolly Holiday with Mary for my audition, and the cantor even like gave me choreography to do with it. But what got me the job was, at the time I played trumpet terribly. And there's that part in the beginning.
Yeah, where the kids they have like the kids that do the different, because it's like a variety show.
Yeah, in the Broadway production it was Clarence and his clarinet. And in this version it was Tommy and his terrific trumpet.
Not so terrific, though.
Oh, I was awful.
At least you could be awful. I feel like if I ever tried an instrument, I wouldn't even be awful. But it's just not how my brain works.
Sure.
So at what point did you decide you wanted to pursue this professionally, like seriously? Like I know a lot of people who are performers, like I've always wanted to do this. But at what point did you decide, okay, this is literally what I want to do? I need to get professional training for this.
Always. And always. I knew that this was going to be my career. You can ask anybody I grew up with. And a part of that was like sort of why I felt like I didn't need to take school very seriously when I was growing up. I remember a math teacher in high school coming up to me and being like, you need to like study harder or take this class more seriously. And I was like, no, I don't.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not going
to
need this. I need to count to 8. And that's about it.
And she was like, well, you're going to need to know the dimensions of the stage. And I was like, no, I won't. That's not my job. Like I was such a jerk about it. But from a very young age, I knew that this was what I was going to do.
Yeah. I love that. I love that and you made that happen. I feel like so many people have this dream and for various reasons, it just doesn't work out.
Sure. But it's a matter of being talented, sure, but also luck. There's so many people that I know that are geniuses that for whatever reason, it just hasn't swung in their favor yet or, whatever. It's a brutal, brutal industry that makes very little sense.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. So I know that the journey kind of from bright-eyed New York City transplant to actual working actor, even Broadway, is super different for everybody. How long did you live in the city before you started booking bigger gigs?
Oh, I came here in 2003, but I started auditioning here in around 2000.
Okay.
And my first major job I didn't book until, I think, 2005 or 2006.
So it was a couple of years.
It was a while. And plus there were so many just ups and downs. I really did not make it easy on myself and put myself in a lot of really bad situations when I was younger. And I really learned the hard way and just sort of had to pave my own path.
I think that's true for everybody. No one journey is the same. I feel like there's people who moved, get cast in Broadway shows out of college. And then sometimes there's people who it takes a decade.
Yeah.
It's not a one size fits all thing.
Yeah. Well, also being like a character guy, being like this heavyset 18-year-old kid or whatever. I remember coming up to audition because I was living in Philadelphia at the time for the non-equity tour of Cinderella. And at the audition, I sang my song, and the director behind the table just said, like, I need you to know that you're fabulous. I have nothing for you, but if you stick with this long enough, you're going to do great. And
that's a really nice thing to say, because normally they just say, thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of you being a character actor, are there things that you think you face as you have challenges that you face that maybe, say, a leading man wouldn't have to deal with? I mean, I know I had a casting director say to me once, because they were like, if you were an ingenue and you were working, I'd be concerned, but because you're a character actress, you have plenty of time. But I feel like that doesn't make you feel better when you're in your late 20s, and you're, going to start working in your early 40s. What are some of the challenges you think you've faced as a character actor as opposed to some other type of, I guess, leading man.
Yeah. Well, I think it all varies. There are so many different challenges for no matter what type you are. But it all depends. I think the business in general is a challenge because also when I booked Wicked, I had just lost all of my weight very rapidly thanks to the Atkins diet and depression. And
Depression will do that.
but I lost it so rapidly I couldn't see it. So I was still stuck in this like self-loathing kind of place. But then I was also in a new arena. Now I wasn't with the other heavyset funny guys. Now I was with all these twinks. And not just like, there were so many of them. There's not as many character people, and there's an ocean of twinks. And so that itself was challenging. But what I found is that I've worked at every sort of size I've been. But I think the challenges get more, like as you get older, yes, there's more work. So I guess the biggest challenge when you're young is hanging in there.
Especially if you're not a dancer. I feel like if you're a dancer and you're young, you can work a lot.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to work. But again, as a character actor, it's kind of like, well, I'm just kind of biding my time and there's nothing new getting added to my resume because I'm not right for anything. So it can be really frustrating.
But nowadays they expect you to dance as well, which I can't stand. I think it should be illegal.
I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of stuff I've auditioned for in the past that because I wasn't a dancer, I didn't get.
Sure.
Like I can name literally some of the auditions.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to Wicked, which I think I saw you in. I've seen Josh in several things before I even knew him.
That's bananas.
Because because that tour came through Los Angeles at the Pantages. So I probably saw you. So this is a show that has a lot of technical aspects and effects. So what are some of the challenges in doing a show like this? For those of you who don't know, theaters can be very dangerous places even when there's not a lot of technical effects. And I've never done a fancy show like that where there's like a dragon on stage. So don't want to spoil that for anybody who's never seen Wicked, but there's a dragon on stage. So as an actor, what are some of the challenges or perks of doing a show that's crazy with the effects like that?
Sure. Well, that was never dangerous for us because it's such a machine. And if you're not Elphaba, you don't have to worry about flying.
That's true.
I'd say the big dangers were like the bubble that Glenda flies in. Bubbles come out of it, and that makes the floor a little wet sometimes. And there was an entrance. It was as I was leaving the show, actually, which was a very emotional time for me, and my replacement was shadowing me backstage. And I just was very stoic, and I was like, listen, Brad, sometimes the bubble juice gets on the stage, so just be aware of that as you run out, because the character runs out and is put in a spotlight and freezes. And as soon as I was like, gave him the warning, I ran out and I slipped and just in slow motion fell flat on my back and looked like a dead roach in a spotlight while Glenda just looked at me with shame. So there was that, but also it was so exciting. Wicked was so new at the time. It was the biggest thing. It was the beginning of it being a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
So there was this built-in fan base. So like, I'm 25 years oldish. Nobody knows anything that I've done. I'm a nobody, and now all of a sudden I have all these fans, and not because I'm magical, just because they're obsessed with the show.
Yeah.
So that was thrilling and also sort of very, very intense because nothing really teaches you how to prepare for that. And then when you leave the show, nothing teaches you how to be prepared for that. To go back to, like for 9 months, I was like a theater celebrity in that ring of, show fans. And now I'm back to being unemployed looking for barista work or anything.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the biggest emotional kind of challenge when you're doing your first big show.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I think that happened with Wicked that would have been dangerous was something happened with the flying rig for Elphaba, and oil spilled on like half the stage. And so like half the stage, like you really couldn't walk on. But you had to. And again, I had another like fly into the air and land like a dead bug during curtain call. So yay me.
It's hard sometimes to be graceful when there's oil on the floor. Yes. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. So you made your Broadway debut in the revival of Hair after being on tour. So is that...
Actually, I booked it.
Okay.
I did the show on Broadway before I did the tour.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. So your Broadway debut was Hair, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how did you end up on the tour after being on Broadway? Did you have to audition? Was it an offer thing? I'm always curious when people kind of transfer to other productions what the process of that is.
Sure. That was an offer, and usually they are in that case because it's easier for them. Also, it's sort of like a thank you for doing the Broadway production. We would love for you to continue on. It's just easier. We don't have to spend money on new costumes, wigs, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it was a real thrilling journey, and it actually came around when I was ready to quit. After Wicked, I'd been doing a regional theater and a lot of it, but I wasn't able to book Broadway. And, there's only so much time that you can spend living out of a suitcase, making very little money, not having, like roots anywhere.
Yeah.
Any relationship that you try to be in ends immediately. And it just was very depressing. And I remember going into the Hair callbacks being like, if I don't book this, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. And I figured that I'd be a therapist. And
which is something I think you would be good at.
Thank you. I think so, too. And so I went. The final callback was insane. They were looking, it just finished in the park. It was transferring to Broadway, and they were looking for 5 swings. And a swing is somebody, an offstage understudy that covers most everybody in the show.
It's literally the hardest thing to do in musical theater.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's easily the hardest job in theater. So there must have been like 50 of us in that final callback.
That's a lot of people for a final callback.
Oh, they were not kidding. And Diane Paulus, the director who I love, she really wants to see every option that she can. And, it's not easy for her, I think, to make those decisions because she wants to see everybody and she wants to see what everybody can bring. And so that callback, I might be exaggerating, but I feel like it lasted for 5 hours.
Wow.
It started off with a dance combo, and this dance combo was like insane. It's Hair, so like you're not really dancing. You're flailing around. You're also portraying young people on a lot of drugs, so there's that aspect. And it got nuts. One man at the audition broke his knee.
What?
Yeah, and now helps run a theater company in Connecticut, but that was sort of the end of his road.
Oh, my gosh.
In that regard. And I remember after the dance and after like putting us in groups and singing and blah, 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 we all got sent into the hallway to wait for our turn to come in and read the sides. And the sides are pieces of the script, And so I was out there in that hall for up until the end. I remember sitting there with Casey Levy. We knew each other through the Wicked family a little bit. And but also everybody there had been in Broadway shows or they're currently in Broadway shows. And so I felt very like self-conscious, very less than. And then finally it was my turn. I went in, I did what I could do, and I left feeling defeated. I called my agent at the time and left him a message saying, I think I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And the next morning I woke up. I think I was probably dieting at the time because that's just what I do that's my hobby. And I was like, screw it. Everything's terrible. I'm ordering pancakes or something dramatic. And then my agent called and he was like, hey, I got your message. Are you okay? And I was like, no. And he was like, I know you want to quit, and that's totally cool. I get it. But do you want to quit after you do Hair? Because you have an offer.
Oh, my gosh.
And I remember just like, I don't remember if I cried, but when so many years of BS just pay off in 1 second, It's a very, very powerful thing. And to be able to call your mom and to be like, I'm making my Broadway debut. When you spend years wondering what it's like to get that phone call, and then all of a sudden you're getting it. And that will never, grow old for me. I'll never not appreciate that moment because it's rare, it's uncommon. It does not happen for the majority of people.
Yeah.
And I do not take that lightly. So I started as a swing. For the first 6 months of the show, I covered, I think, 12 people.
Oh, my gosh.
It was very stressful.
Yeah.
Also because it's hair and it's so loose, it was almost impossible to be exactly where somebody is on stage when they are doing their show. So I would sit out in different parts of the balconies and I would follow one person every performance and I would memorize everything that they did, all of their traffic patterns. And it sort of became an obsession. I think I had a script for every person that I covered and different graphs and diagrams. And now and then you would take a break. The swing dressing rooms were on the 6th floor of the building. A walk up, mind you. Ugh. We called it 125th Street. And sometimes we would just have enough and just throw a swing party on the swing floor and just do that during a show. But most of the time I was in the mezzanine.
Yeah, you're following
studying.
the people you're shadowing.
Yeah.
You're shadowing.
And
basically.
then 6 months in, my dear friend and incredible performer, Theo Stockman, left the show to go do American Idiot. And they came to me and they said, do you want to take over? And I was like, yes. And it was my first, I guess, role on Broadway. And then we were all going to London to do it on the West End. And I understudied Margaret Mead in Claude's dad. And the brilliant Andrew Kober is just one of those performers who never call out. And then he, at the last minute, took a vacation. And so
Which is rare in Broadway, being able to take vacations.
So I was finally going on, and Diane came to see, I think, my first or second performance. And immediately after the show, I was asked to stay in New York and take over for Andrew and not go to the West End, which I'm glad that I did. At the same time, I really regret not getting that experience of going across the pond. But so I stayed and took over, and then the show was closing, and they said, will you take it on the road? I said, absolutely. And then we were supposed to go to Japan that summer.
Oh.
And then the tsunami happened. So Japan was canceled, and we ended up coming back to Broadway.
I remember that. My sister saw that come back to Broadway production.
Yeah.
Because she saw the production of Hair you were in, I think, 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
Because she loves Hair. Her dog is named Burger. And I think she wants to name all dogs after Hair characters.
Sure.
I'm not exaggerating this.
I love that.
She loves it so much. And, I think that production might have been a little bit gateway into her appreciating musical theater a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you were in that and you were part of that.
Oh, that means a lot.
You do a lot of readings, and I'm assuming you do some workshops as well.
Oh, yeah.
And those are 2 different things. Can you, like I said, I prefaced your questions with, I know the answers to this, but I want to hear you tell our people listening who may not know the answer all this information, because you would probably be able to explain it better. So what's the difference between a reading and a workshop? And what is the process kind of from casting to presentation for them?
Sure. Well, it actually is very different from show to show. Sometimes there's a reading and it's for development where they just want to hear the piece. They want to hear what they want to change. They want to hear new voices bring what they have to the table. Other times it's really more of an audition where not for the performer, but for the piece itself. They're not really developing it yet. They're trying to get money.
Yeah.
And
which is the number one issue with doing a show is money.
Money.
There's never enough money.
It's always about money, which I understand because a typical 29-hour reading, meaning you have 29 hours to put it up, which is like a basic typical work week, and then a presentation, that can cost at least $30,000.
It's so expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, and the actors are the cheapest part.
Oh, yeah. Always.
The actors are always the cheapest part of doing
Sadly,
theater.
because so many people will do it for free.
That's the thing, and this is not dentist. It's not like a dentist is gonna, fill a cavity for free. But actors love performing so much; it's so much part of who they are. The producers have figured out they will do it for free, which is why we have community theater or stipend theater or non-union regional theater, where I would work for like $125 a week in equity points. They figured out that people will do that.
Yeah. But so that's typically what a reading is. A workshop or a lab, as they call it these days, is much more intense. It could be a process of where you're putting up the show and you don't have the actual set pieces, but you have pieces that mimic those pieces. Sometimes there's costumes. Sometimes there's a full orchestra. Oftentimes you're like in a fancy mic. And you put up the show to see how it works. And again, you're doing it for money people, or you're, or you're working for a company like, let's say, Universal Theatricals, who's doing my next show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
But where it's like the money is there. It's not really an issue.
They're just trying to see what needs to be changed, tweak it. And like you said, also an audition, because a lot of the time people who do workshops or readings end up in the original cast of stuff. So that's the key, friends. If you want a Broadway career, is get in with people who do readings and make friends with the creatives, because you're much more likely to be at an OPC if you've done the reading.
It's very true. A lot of the shows that I've done, I guess Prom and Finding Neverland specifically, all started from the very, very first reading of it. But yeah, so that's sort of what a workshop is. But what people forget is that everything is an audition. Your performance in the reading will affect if you are being considered for the workshop. Even, oftentimes you do the reading and then they're like, great, will you audition for the workshop? Can you dance? Can you do all this? Because in the reading, there wasn't a choreographer. Now there is. And then you do the workshop. And again, that is an audition. They don't need to take you with it to the next step. So, and just like then you do an out-of-town tryout. That is also an audition.
Yeah, sometimes people don't make it out of the out-of-town tryout.
Exactly. So it's always high stakes.
Yeah, it's stressful.
Yes.
And it's not even just your actual performance. It's how you gel with the director and everything. Because you could be a very talented performer, but if the director's like, you're a son of a bitch, they don't want to work with you. Patrick and I talk about sometimes that people want to work with their friends. It's fun. People want to have fun. They want to work with people they like. So that, we've all been in a production where there's some guy or girl who kind of is not like the rest of the cast, and it becomes like a whole thing. There's drama. So it makes sense that through this entire process, you're not only auditioning with your performance, but with yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes it's, do I want to spend 8 to 12 hours with you? Are you going to keep the dressing room a happy place?
Yeah.
You
get one negative person, it kind of ruins the whole thing.
It ruins everything. Absolutely everything.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So in addition to all your Broadway shows and readings, you've also done quite a few off-Broadway shows. Can you explain to our listeners what that means and how that's different from everything else?
Sure. Well, technically speaking, it's really just a matter of the size of the house. I think it's off-Broadway is like, 500 and lower, I think. I'm looking at Patrick right now. 499 seats to 99 seats are off Broadway. And 99 and under is off. So technically that's what it is. But really here in New York, off Broadway is basically just like, depending on the show, of course, it's a Broadway show, just much less money is involved.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not anywhere near a Broadway show. Sometimes it's really like Ratchet and Poop. But, because anything can technically be off Broadway.
Yeah, as long as they can secure the space. It could be no set and no costumes.
Yeah.
Or it can be, or it could be the public.
Yeah, or it could be the public, which is major, where there's a lot of money involved. You're not making it, but There's a lot
Are
of
the
money
actors
involved.
ever the ones making it, unless you're someone like Bette Midler or Kristen Chenoweth?
No, but even then, when I did Shakespeare in the Park, like we were all making the same amounts of money. And I was like, well, Amy Adams can afford to work for this amount of money. I live here in New York and I would like a raise.
Speaking of that, is it true that the cast of Hair all made the same amount of money?
In the park?
No, on Broadway.
No.
I didn't, because someone told me that everybody made the same amount of money.
Lies.
Okay, well,
Oftentimes they'll do something called, I hate it so much, favored nations, which really means nothing. There's no contract, there's no legality to favored nations. It just means everybody gets the same. But that's not true. If you're a lead performer in the show, you're going to be making much more money, period.
Yeah.
They even announced, I mean, there's no point in not saying the name. You can Google it. But they announced Eden Espinosa as the lead woman as Sheila in Hair when her contracts weren't done. And they were trying to pay her very, very little. And so very publicly, she was like, nope, I'm not doing the show. Bye. And, but no, not everybody makes the same amount of money.
There's all different levels. It also has to do with how fancy you are or your agent or all sorts of stuff. There's lots of different levels of pay in the arts. So you kind of mentioned a little bit out-of-town tryouts. You've done several of these, and I've seen out-of-town tryouts. One of my really good friends was the assistant MD and then the MD on Doubtfire. So I saw it in Seattle in January of 2020. And then I saw a dress rehearsal preview, and then I saw it. So I saw kind of all the versions of this. The shows that you've done, how much do they change from the out-of-town tryout to Broadway opening?
It really depends on the show. The Prom did not change very much. Some jokes changed, some... I might be confusing the out of town with the lab, but the original "I Just Want to Dance with You" ended very quietly with her just being like, "and a song," and then it just ended. And then when we got to Broadway, it was like, "and a song,"
Because it's Broadway and you gotta screlt everything.
Because it's Broadway.
There's no nuance in Broadway anymore. And as far as females, and this is something I got yelled at all the time in conservatory for, is that everything doesn't need to be at a 10, Nicole, because I'm a loud singer and I was young and didn't understand nuance. But now I'm like, but look at all this. There's no nuance. You are a female who can belt or mix, and there's no nuance.
Sure.
They don't want that.
Depending
Even with
on the
Sondheim,
show. Yeah.
Which is not how Sondheim's supposed to be sung.
But there are other shows that Finding Neverland that changed,
which I also saw with my mom.
Really?
I remember I saw it with my mom. I don't remember why we specifically chose that, but I really liked it. And I don't think she'd seen the movie, and I was like, this is sad.
It is sad.
But it's bittersweet sad. There's level, that woman at Follies, there's levels of sad, and you can splice this in. When I saw the revival of Follies, I saw it with Bernadette. And we saw it in LA too, but I saw it first here because I think I was auditioning for a summer stock production of Annie, and I came to the city by myself, and I was like, what am I going to see? Follies. And there's a moment at the end of the show where Bernadette Peters' character is the last person to leave the theater, and she was by herself, and nobody breathed for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
She was just having a moment, and I was like, this is acting, because she's so amazing.
Yeah, she's a genius.
It's always crazy to see performers that are just on such a different level.
Yeah, they're aliens.
Yeah, I don't.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair. They're just. It's kind of crazy. So you mentioned the Prom. So for those, you can explain the plot better than I can. But as a gay man, was this experience, because it was kind of a groundbreaking show? Mm-hmm. Was this something that was very emotional, especially close to you, as opposed to some of the other shows you'd done?
Absolutely. For people who do not know the show, the musical is about a teenage lesbian in the middle of nowhere that, and this part is actually based on a true story, that tries to take her closeted girlfriend to the prom, and the PTA reacts by canceling the prom. And the fiction part of the musical is there's this group of Broadway sort of has-beens, these egomaniacs that are so full of themselves. And the only way to save their career is to get some good press. And so they decide to become activists, but not actual activists. And then they read about this lesbian in Indiana on Twitter, and they storm this tiny, tiny little town to force these people to have a lesbian prom. It's very funny, but very moving. And we performed on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and it was the first time in the parade's history that there was a same-sex kiss. And this wasn't like making out, it wasn't raunchy, it wasn't dirty, it wasn't anything that hadn't been on the parade in the sense of like, we see straight couples kissing all the time.
Yeah.
And we do not bat an eye. But this blew up. And Macy's very much was very proud of this.
Good for Macy's.
Yeah, very much saying like,
Macy's,
this
which
is
was
what we
owned
want.
at one point by Jews who died on the Titanic. Fun fact for you.
Hey.
Yes. Bringing it back to the Judaism thing. Ida and Isidore Strauss.
Oh, right. And in the musical,
yeah,
they're
they're the old, which I am so excited to see that.
Yeah.
Because Titanic is my jam. Again, sad musical, but it's so good. But yeah, owned by Jews.
Yeah, but Macy's, they were insistent that they wanted that on the broadcast. But after that, I think I tweeted back when I had Twitter something about this being gay history. And all of a sudden, news programs across the globe picked up that tweet, and every hate group in the world came at us.
Wow.
And to the point that there were death threats. We had to have security escort us out of the theater. Some performances, one of the leads in the show, somebody got their phone number and started leaving death threats on their voicemail, and it got very scary. So there's a song in Act 2 where this person is coming to terms with their sexuality and calls it her unruly heart. And so we sort of formed this thing called the Unruly Hearts Club between us and the fans of the show. And we would meet so many people that were struggling with coming out, so many parents who knew that their child was gay or queer, whatever, and but their child hadn't told them yet, and they were struggling with how to support them. So many people that were very against their kids being gay and having to come to terms with that on their own. And for me, it was a moment of like having an unruly heart. I even got a tattoo of a heart with like a rainbow on it, and it's really cute. But it did have a big impact, as well as being like a plus size person, a plus size gay guy, to be able to like be center stage and sing a song. That's very, very powerful.
I love that you were able to have that experience. I think this is one of the things I love about theater is it can be really groundbreaking and life-changing for people in a way that I think sometimes film and TV can't.
Yeah.
You can also take a lot of risks, even though we talked about it being money in theater, that you wouldn't be able to take with like a major big budget Hollywood film. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the things I think makes theater so great is you're able to sometimes do groundbreaking, risky work that may not be embraced by the larger community.
Yeah.
So, kind of jumping into people you've worked with and people you want to work with. You worked with some of the biggest directors on Broadway. Did you find this intimidating auditioning for them or working with these people, or how do you deal with that? Because I feel like if I got in a room with Casey Nicola, I'd be like, oh my God.
Oh, Casey's a sweetheart. It depends on the director. There are some that are extremely intimidating. James Lapine being one of those people.
Yeah.
He is a genius, and he's also terrifying. And, when he likes you, he's great. When he's not liking you, it's scary. But at the same time, I love him and I respect him, and he is a terrific director. He's a genius. And then there are people like Diane Paulus who like initially, I'm intimidated to meet, but then you work with them and it's like, oh, you and I work in the same way. We feel the same way about this process. We both get excited about the same things, and we love working together. And I consider you a colleague and a friend rather than a person, a gatekeeper, a person in power.
I love that so much. One of my favorite things I ever did was a production of Fiddler on the Roof in Northern California, and it was such a collaborative work, and it's just everyone worked together, and the director was very on the same level. And I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. I feel like, whether it be regional theater and there's not enough time to kind of play and collaborate, but I love when everybody's on the same team and the director isn't like sitting on a pedestal and is like, you down there, you do this, like on a god mic.
Yeah. I don't love working for people like that.
Yeah. It's not fun.
No, but also I just get annoyed the older that I get, because I'm like, you realize we're not fighting ISIS. We're doing a musical.
Some people take it that seriously, though. And I've worked with those people, too.
Yeah.
It's like tap dancing is the end-all, be-all, guys.
And that's fine for them, but I think that's what I hate about the industry is just and people in general. It's what I hate about people in general. Like, if you're not saving baby Jessica in the well, like, get over yourself.
It's true.
I
know Patrick and I'll be like, we're not curing cancer here. We're giving a tour of Soho.
Yeah. Like, everybody calm down. Also, like, oh, I know you're brilliant. Lucky you. It's just like
Well, the most brilliant and talented people don't need to show you or tell you. They just are.
Yeah.
And they're confident in that they are.
Or they don't need to be mean, but oftentimes the mean ones just don't have any social skills, or they have much bigger problems and they take it out on you. So those are, you're going to have great experiences and you're going to have less great experiences, like anything in life.
Is there a director you have worked with that you'd want to work with?
Yes. I love Ivo van Ho's visions. I love what he does. It would be a dream. Jessica, I think her name is. I'm terrible with names. And it's terrible because she's my friend's wife. But
are you talking about
she directed Kimberly Akimbo,
Christopher Seaver's wife? That's Jessica. Yeah. That's who Heather did. Google this. That's who Heather did Grease with. Jessica Stone.
Jessica Stone. That's it.
Who was an actor?
Yeah, Chris Fitzgerald's wife. They met performing at Encores, which I love.
Yeah, that's so fun.
But yeah, I think she's brilliant. There are so many people that I would love to get a chance to work with.
Is there an actor that you haven't worked with that you'd want to work with?
Oh my gosh. I mean, who doesn't want to work with Patti LuPone? She's
no longer a member of Equity, so I don't know if she'd be able to do shows with you.
I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
She'll be back.
I mean, I don't blame her. She was like, there's nothing new. I hate theater. It's all, it's all rehashes of movies.
Yeah. And also, like, Broadway is hard. It is not for the innocent. It is not for the weak. It is very hard. It's harder than people think.
Well, it's nonstop. And you've mentioned to me, because we talked about like my journey. If I was to do a Broadway show, I'd probably be an understudy. And you're like, you'd never see your daughter.
Ever.
Because you get a day off, and then during the day, on the days you're not doing shows, you're doing understudy rehearsals.
Yeah.
So it's you don't get vacations, and if you get sick, you don't call in sick unless you're dying.
Yeah, or if you get sick, you lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
Your dressing room is probably on the 5th or 6th floor of a walk-up of a building that was built,
in
like
1903.
when Moses was around, and the dancing, it's nonstop. Your body, the older that you get, the less your body wants to handle it. And also, like, you're working until you get home around 11 at night.
And then it's really hard to, like, come down, because I feel like when I do a show, especially, I've done Fiddler a billion times, you're so hyped up and so emotional, and you're like, now I have to go home and sleep? Like, no, that's why actors go out after shows, because they want to, like, kind of wind down, I think, from everything.
Well, also, like, whether you have like food issues or not, they say like, oh, don't eat after 10 or whatever, but it's like,
when were you going to eat?
I started work at 7.
Yeah.
So, and I got home at 11. So like 11:30 is dinner.
Not to mention that as people are always bringing food to the theater, and there's like a cake or cupcakes, and you're like, God damn it. Why are you bringing this stuff? Because you're so hungry, because you are starting your job when dinner starts, and it's like, well, there's snackies here.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing. Not to mention that actors all have, regardless of their size, have body self-image issues because of all sorts of magical
What a world,
things.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. They're getting a little bit better about it, but it's like a token person.
I feel like they've gotten a lot better, but but also I don't blame it. It is the entertainment industry. It is a industry of giving people a fantasy. And whether that is a Barbie doll or a Barbie movie, things look certain ways. And I don't, I'm not saying that diversity isn't good, body diversity. I think it's brilliant and important. But I also understand the other side of it.
Yeah.
And, it is a business.
Yeah. You want sometimes the dancers to all, especially in certain shows, you want all the dancers to kind of look the same.
Yeah, depending on what it is,
Yeah. So you have yet to do a non-musical on Broadway, like what we in the industry call a straight play. Mm-hmm. Is this something you'd be interested in doing? Have you auditioned for these?
Oh, that's my dream. I have not auditioned for one, but that is the dream. Could you imagine? Not having to sing into the stratosphere or dance? Just like get on stage and talk? That is a dream. So,
and they're usually shorter, so you're out earlier.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Paulus, Diane, during Neverland, during Tech, my character flew in the beginning
remember
of
this
too.
It was like an accident, like you weren't supposed to go up and then you did, or
something like that.
You're like, I don't even remember.
Swing across the stage and fake fall and all
Yes,
this
I
stuff.
remember this.
And getting into the harness was the most uncomfortable thing in the world, where I had like these burly tech guys like strapping me into this harness, and it just felt like the corset from hell. And Diane was sitting there, and I was just yelling like, put me in a play! Put me in a damn play, you monster! Yeah, I'd love to be in a play. Please, please.
Just a little reminder, this is a 2-part episode. Josh and I still have a lot more to talk about. We're going to be releasing that second episode later this week, so be sure to subscribe and check it out. Thank you so much.